Hello, my name is Harold Swifty Shaver, and I'm at the Morgantown History Museum today, and we're speaking with Al Anderson. Al, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Osage, West Virginia, May the 5th, 1937, which was my 81st birthday just past Saturday. And just made my 81st, and grew up there and went to school at Floyd B. Cox School, which was the all-black school in those days, and went there from 1 to 6. And then when you graduated there, if you graduated there, you went from 7 to 12 at Monongalia High. And but growing up in Osage, as many people know, it was a coal mine town, and all of our dads, worked in those mines. And we had about 19 nationalities was there in that town. And I think that one of the good things about growing up at Osage, because out of all the places that was kind of segregated, Morgantown included, Osage was probably one of the places that there was no segregation. No. We all lived in each other's homes, and many people come from the old, 19 nationalities. That means many people that came from different countries. We all lived on the same hills. We lived in each other's homes, and we never needed two schools, because when the bell rang at each school, we all just, So that was kind of the growing up that we kind of did in Osage, and all the different things, we did with, we had the Scotland Settlement House, we had the shack that we all went and, we did our swimming, and at the shack we had people that, teachers there that would teach many people, and many people from the old country that didn't speak English. That's where they learned to speak, and many people learned to sew and learned to cook and things like that, So it was just a town of a lot of folks that we all were just a family of miners. We had like 40 mines there, so everybody basically worked in the mine, and that was our kind of a growing up in that area.
You're mostly known for your musical career. How did that start?
Well, 1959, I was on a Friday, I got home and getting ready to go out and party a little bit, and my dad said the sheriff had called, and that was Sheriff Whiston at the time. And I'm trying to figure, man, what did I do, You don't know what you kind of did. But my dad didn't say I did anything wrong, but he just said the sheriff called, and that was enough, So I called the sheriff on Monday, and he said, and what he was calling about was, he said his son Dave, Ed and Keith Collins, Roger Britton, and Ronnie Kemper had a band, heard I was a singer. I had no aspirations of singing in a band, I had no thought about it. And I started singing with those guys in 1959, and we sang. I was with them from 1959 to 1962. And but that's
the name of the group?
The Fabians.
Uh-huh.
Fabians, and popular all around. And we played all over West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and parts of Maryland. And in 1962, I had all the guys were graduating college in 1962. I knew that they were not going to be going on the road or anything like that. Matter of fact, I didn't think it would play much more music. So I had an opportunity to get involved with Billy Ward and the Dominoes. There was an article in all the black newspapers all over the country, and I was one of two selected to come to Hollywood, California. That's how I got out of Morgantown. But in the meantime, we would travel all the, at one time, we would go to Pittsburgh a lot. Now in Latrobe, PA, man, I think it was named Frank's Place. See, all the big million sellers, they would come into Pittsburgh during those old days. And like the, like Conway Twitty, Jan and Dean, the Marvelettes, the Isley Brothers, the Vibrations, Ray Peterson, Johnny Tillotson, but nobody bought a band in, they just bought the singers. And even today, when I think about I think about, you know, how my voice is very strong, and it's been strong for, next year will be 60 years. And if you've heard me even a year, or today, if you heard me last week, you know that, you know, I still have that strong voice. And when I would go to practice at the Collins house, they would have all the songs written out, the words written out and everything, and they played all the songs in the key of the performer, which means that all those folks that we backed, we played all their songs in their keys. But Al, I knew nothing about music, nothing about notes of music, so I sang in everybody's key. So I probably sang for 25 years before I knew that there was a key that I sang in, although now I'll give the band a key and that's what I sing in. So that's how I got musically started with the Fabians, and that call from Sheriff Whiston, which you know, he was my hero for starting me, you know, in that music, because I probably would never possibly been in a band, you know, had I not got that opportunity.
Who influenced you the most in music?
Well, you know, I tell you, a lot of guys, you know, see, I never was even the one with Billy Ward and the Dominoes. They were like that 5 guys singing, and Billy Ward wasn't a singer. He was a piano player. So my idol was guys like Jackie Wilson, Sam Cooke, because, you know, my voice fit theirs. And even Elvis Presley was sang in the same key that I sang in. So many performers that sang in the same key I sang in, you know, a lot of their songs that I really like to do. And, you know, and even today I go on all the country, I go on the country shows, but I do the old time rock and roll, which is pretty popular in those places because, you know, you go from a certain beat to a certain beat.
Now, see, you're teaching me something here. I didn't know that certain people have certain keys that they sing in. So. Oh
yeah, yeah. See, I sing in a lot of different keys, but at that time, it didn't matter whether it was a man or a woman's song. They just had all the songs written out. So Al didn't know anything about it, so I could hit all the notes because I didn't know any better, you know. But then when I got a chance to go with Billy Ward and the Dominoes, I was gone for 20 years. And when I first went to California, the guys, the Fabian guys back here, they could outplay but anybody I performed with in California or anybody I performed with in DC. At that time, there was no Motown, there was no Beatles. You know, there were all the groups that was, there was still some group, you know, many groups out there that, mostly the doo-wop groups, you know, and even when we sang, even like we had the gospel conventions, you know, what do they call it, but they would get together on Sundays, and nobody had an instrument. See, what you heard all vocal without instruments, you know, a cappella was almost all of that. And I think a lot of folks, you know, started there. A lot of even the big time singers started with singing, you know, a cappella, you know, in those groups. But when I got with Billy Ward, really kind of a strange story on, see, Billy Ward had, I read on the back of one of his jackets that, just reading about him, and one of the stories was they have a picture on there on the little DVD that I have, and someone that didn't tell Billy Ward he had a contract. So when Billy Ward hit this one, either 60-Minute Man, Have Mercy Baby, one of those big time songs, Billy Ward's money was held up because the guy never told him, and then somebody saw that guy's picture and cost Billy Ward quite a bit of money. So when I got to California, I had this little contract in Pittsburgh. Really, you know, I wouldn't have had to bother at all, but if I had not read that on that jacket. So when I got to California, and we started practicing and things, and as soon as I got to, we got to the part, we're down at the, getting matched up for our clothes, you know. When you get down to the tailor, they ask that one question, does anybody have a contract? And I thought about that jacket that I read. So I decided, I said, well, I have this little contract in Pittsburgh, probably because, you know, see, they didn't want the Fabian band, they just wanted the singer. Yeah. But they had to update that $1 each year, but you know, times went on that never happened, but I didn't want to take it. So I got on that bus in California I rode 7 days straight, 3.5 days to Pittsburgh and 3.5 days back. When I got to Pittsburgh, I broke that contract either for $50 or $10, and I didn't have either one. So I got that done. I went back to California, but it was too late to go on that trip. So
it was too late to
too late to go on that trip. So I went to D.C. when my brother.
Life might have really changed.
At that point in time, yeah. And then after about 1.5 years or so, Billy Ward got back in touch with me. I'm in D.C. to come back to California. So I went back to California, and we went in the studio and we did this song, "What Do You Do New Year's Eve?" which is a very popular song, sold millions of copies. And then another thing got in the way. Just getting ready to go down the road. See, Billy Ward, when I first was in touch with them, they were in Japan, Okinawa, the Philippines, Hawaii, Canada, and they got to Bakersfield is when they sent a telegram for me. They will meet me at the train station. So after we do this, what do you do on New Year's Eve? Now, you know, and how I got to sing that, the group, it was 2 songs, the band played for a number, you know, for a good while. You in the studio almost all day. And then the background singers, which I was one of them, we sang the background of the song. And then the lead singer was over there, and now everybody's getting low, and he looked, the lead singer couldn't get the song. And Billy Ward looked at me and said, "Could you sing that song?" And that's how I sang that, "What Do You Do New Year's Eve?" And that song sold millions. And then my brother got in touch with me. My dad worked in a coal mine. He was 72 and retired from a coal mine. And all those folks died of black lung in those days. And he called me and said my dad was had been in a hospital. And so, see, there was a thought whether you go on that road or, my dad died 3 weeks after I got back here. But if I was 10,000 miles away and not being able to get back to my dad's funeral, see, that would have been, I don't care how much music, how much money, right, nothing would replace that. So I came back home and never heard from those guys again. And 40 years later, a man named Marv Goldberg called me. Didn't know how, because I never sang, you know, out with the group. So he said he was a historian. And he he checked every place and everybody. He said he finally caught up with me. And the first thing he asked me was, "Al, did you ever get any royalties for that song?" And that was 40 years later. That was 2005, and I did that in 1965. So, but never saw those folks again, you know. But then I went back to D.C. and I performed there for, well, I was there in D.C. 17 years, in Los Angeles for 3 years. But a lot of music I did.
Did you get royalties eventually?
No, never got a dime.
And that sold millions.
And still does, you know. And, but you know, but I've been very fortunate to do a lot of music in a lot of different places, even here, and every place I've been. You know, I did bar mitzvahs and weddings for 13 years in D.C., and even if I were there today, you know, instead of $2,500 for a gig, would be about $10,000 for a gig, you know. But you know, you just do what you do. I'm not going back there at this point in time, you know.
And I'm sure that you thank the good Lord for all that's happened to you here.
Oh,
in your lifetime. I know you're really popular around this area.
Such a blessing.
A lot. In fact, I was looking for you at Scott's Run Museum, and you said, "No, I was out singing at
I had to go
a wedding."
Yep. And I sang at this wedding for this. I met this young lady. She had a jacket she needed fixed, and someone told her to come down and see me, and I fixed that jacket for her. Her boyfriend was in the hospital in Pittsburgh, and he did lose part of one of his legs. And so she said that they were going to get married May the 5th. I said, you know, that's my birthday, May the 5th. I'm going to come out and I'm going to do music for you guys on that day. And that's what I did Saturday. Did music, and after the preacher did the ceremony, I told him I was going to sing this one song called "Look at Us." What's his name? I can't think of his name. Just it's second, a pretty song. I said, I'm going to sing that for you. You know, right after the preacher marries you. And then I did music, you know, like pretty much a couple hours, you know, hour and a half or so after that also. But those kind of things when you don't say no. And when, and the blessing with me is I had a mini stroke about 17 years ago, And I think, I just say to myself, I said, God blessed me without having to learn how to talk again. Sometimes you get deformed, and I think he was speaking to me and say, look, I'm gonna let you keep those vocal cords, but you better use them.
Yeah.
And I do, because I sing everywhere. Sometimes last week, week before, I sang 4 times in between Saturday and Sunday. I sang 4 times, and sometimes, that happens.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, one lady asked me, said, man, how can you sing like for a whole hour and you never stop, I said, when I was in D.C., every gig was 4 hours. So yeah. I'm used to singing 4 hours, not 1 hour. So, but that strengthens your voice also,
You told us that there wasn't much segregation in the town of Osage, but I'm sure that at some point along the line you had some problems in the country.
Well, even here in Morgantown, I was telling someone that I shined shoes up at Perry Brothers. They were right on High Street, and Have a Lunch was on Pleasant Street. Mm-hmm. So we 9 to 9 we shined shoes. There were about 7 chairs, and so we would order our lunch at Have a Lunch, and we would have to eat in the back. See, so they'd bring the food out to us, but we didn't. We were, it was almost like an automatic thing. You knew exactly what to expect. It didn't bother you in some many people, like just before I got to the high school over there, and we were talking about how, when there was no school buses that took you down to Beckley or took you to, even to Clarksburg or Fairmont, they had these guys, their personal cars would take you. And then you had to live in somebody's home. You couldn't live even in a hotel, in those days. But here in this area, it's like it wasn't even I know sometimes, when people don't even want me, to even kind of say, that even, a black man's restaurant here, say we couldn't eat in the black man's restaurant either. So, see, the segregation was all over. It wasn't just, where there's white places, or, it was everywhere, right here in Morgantown. But then, to me, and I've been maybe very fortunate, when I got with that band, everybody had total respect for you. Anybody that needed, I remember people would come to me, and you had those $300 loans at those finance companies, people would come and I would arrange for them, I know, to get a loan. Or many folks that I got a job, here he is, I'm the black guy, but I got many guys who are just white guys, jobs as well, because you knew so many people and people had a respect for you. And the same as today, in those respects. But it really wasn't a bother as much. I'll tell you, when I was with that band, we would go out into Pennsylvania, we would go every place we would go. These guys would be worrying about, the girls and things like that,
Yeah.
And all the places. I'm the only person. 90% of most of all the music I've done, I've been the only one of my persuasion. That's including churches. Mm-hmm. That's including almost every place I go. So, but I've always been treated, just so great. So I never had, but when these guys were going, my whole, and they would never know this. One of these days I'm going to tell that story, because they never knew. The only thing I'm thinking about is, am I going to be able to eat?
Yeah.
When we go to those places, am I going to be able to be fed, And I would look in these towns, and if I don't see a black person in town, I say, no, you ain't got no chance of getting no food, And even if it was a black person, don't mean still you're going to be able to sit down. But I never had, one place in Fairmont is the only place that they didn't put a plate in front of me, And I was so thankful when we would go to Latrobe and places like that. They had McDonald's. See, they only sold about 14 hamburgers when we first started going there. And I was always glad about that, and there was a place in Fairmont where they bought the food outside. So many times that these guys didn't know, what my feelings was, because inside, Al was the hero. You know what I mean? You know, I'm the front singer, so everybody is. But when they're outside, you know, then and even today, I would just say a little bit about, you know, today. I worry more about today than I did then. You know,
right?
I used to go. I would go everywhere. I used to go to this place down at that Century, West Virginia, and I'd tell those folks, and they had no money. I'd tell those folks down there, I said, look, I come in 5 counties to get there, and 1 county twice. You know, just to come down there. And then many of those places I would go, and then, you know, I'm very reluctant to go, and especially at night. Because even though you might be the hero inside, but you don't know what's going on the outside.
Yeah, right.
See, if your car breaks down or something, you know, whose door would you knock on? Right. So in the old days of time, I never worried about, I traveled everywhere. And, but people always treat you, you know, just treat you so good. And in the days of, when the Fabian days, see, they always had like the Fonzie guys outside. You know, you remember these guys, they'd be on the outside, you know, and it was, before I get into this, Al, if anybody says anything to you, you know, so you know, like I'm covered in there, you know, if anybody says anything, out of the way to you, you know. So I've been very fortunate that way.
How about telling us that story about your tuxedo?
Well, you know, in those days, you know, if you're all dressed up, you know, I'm going to make money. But my buddies, you know, I'm here singing with this guy from Morgantown High, and I would be like, I'd be embarrassed with this tuxedo on, and I'd wear like a top coat,
yeah,
you know.
You're making some money.
I'm making some money, but I'm sneaking out of town, you know, and because if they saw you, know, it'd be like, yeah. But see, you left town, like, see, most of the older guys, see, they're not even downtown at like, it's 5:30, 6 o'clock when I'm coming over to meet these guys. You see, they don't come down to about, you know, 9 o'clock or something like that. So at the early evening time, you know, I could kind of just slip out of town, you know. But it'd be like, man, you know, man, where you going, man? Where's this guy going all the
Can you tell us about your work in politics in Osage?
You know, a lot of folks, you know, and I see people all the time that say, man, you know, are you still mayor of Osage? You know, not a voted-in mayor or anything like that, but most things that happen, you know, folks will get in touch with me. And, you know, many of the things like, you know, closing our town, which I did write an article in the Gold and Seal magazine, how, you know, the many things that happened where we had 12 police officers down there at one time, and Stanley Solomon and his, part of his family, we got together and we, you know, sort of, you know, got rid of those guys that just was just bad news for the town. And we had I was 15 years as the chairperson for the Public Service District, and I did that. We had sewer that came down everybody's home in that little creek. You know, most everybody went into the creek. You know, and that was one thing. It was a blessing to the people there that we had, you know, public sewer, and then in a kind of a I'll say kind of a devilish situation that we built that, and then they put people on the board that and then took us off the board, Bob Martin and myself, and that was the board members, and they put these 3 guys on it, just turned it over to MUB. And the reason for that story is, when we first started, you know, sometimes, you know, they appoint you to the board, but they don't appoint you, you know, in DC, where I managed $1 million shoe operation there, but I come back here, see, everybody knew about music and knew I worked in shoes, but people were not thinking that this guy's very smart, you know, so, you know, put that guy on the board, put that shoe guy on the board, put Bob Martin on the board, see. And not even a thought of ever getting sewer there. So the engineers, we met at the shack for about 45 minutes until the ball guys came and was paying $25 to play basketball. So the engineers said, we'll work for you they worked for about a month, and then they said, well, there's a grant that you get from the governor. So the engineer said, Al, we'll work for you, but the county commission is dragging their feet about that grant. They apply for that grant. So I went to the county commission, and I said, well, one thing about the county commission also, if I went there today, this is a day, and if I'm sitting back there with nothing to do, they'll all be looking back here to figure out what Al's doing here, you know. Mm-hmm. So when I went, they at the end of the almost the end of the session, Al, you have anything? I said, yeah. The engineer said that you guys are dragging your feet about getting that grant from the governor, $1.5 million grant. So the big laugh of that day, about 50 people, and they said, well, Al, why don't you have the governor bring the money in? Well, 2 weeks later, there was the governor right down where you go down there, where the museum is. There's the governor, there's that check, and then there's all the politicians. I got pictures of all of it that, see, there was no thought about doing that, but then they challenged me, and through many different situations, that governor brought that money in. It happened to Governor Underwood brought that check in for that $1.5 million. And I have pictures of all of it. But they never had an intention of having sewer at Scotts Run. Mm-hmm. So we did that for 15 years. We did about $16 million worth of projects, and we were considered. When I would go to Charleston, about every other year, you'd go and just update on things, and mm-hmm. and there's like about 200 people. They're all different public service districts. Some, you know, you have to go there before you're on the board. You have to go and be there and get certified. And when people would come out, we had a teacher every hour. Each hour somebody would come out, you know, and here I am, you know, I'm recognizable anyway. And when they come out, they said, oh, we work with Mr. Anderson. Oh, we work with Mr. Anderson. So, you know, it was like you did a good job and you got your money. But many of those people there came to get money, mm-hmm. but you've already got money. Yeah. So who do you think everybody wants to talk with when we had a break, you see? Yeah. Everybody wanted to talk with the man that got the money. Yeah. So after that, then they put 3 guys on the board and took us off the board, and that was that challenge there. And the other challenge of our town in Osage, which, you know, we worked very hard to, when they close our town down. You see, if they don't close our town, see, Granville would never be up on that hill. See, that's all Osage up there. Yeah. So they maneuvered to close, and that's all in the book. I wrote all that, and it's not something I'll say today that it's all in the book, you know, and I did a lot of research, and many of us researched all that. We got all kind of documents from Charleston that shows the town was never closed. But the only way Granville could be in there if that town was closed. That's how Granville's on that hill.
See, I didn't know that part about Granville being up on that hill.
And many people that would come in here that lived here 50 years ago, when they come down that thing and they see Granville, it's almost like, I'm sure a lot of folks would almost have a heart attack.
Yeah, they grab the wheel.
Yeah, right. You know, Granville, you know, I mean, all that was Osage up there. So, you know, and I think the next article that I'm going to write is going to be like a why. Why? Yeah. You know, why did those things happen? And at one time, if you had 40 mines in Scotts Run, all the money was in Scotts Run. And you see what Scotts Run is now. See, Scotts Run probably fed people from Granville, Westover, Star City, Morgantown. All the money came out of those mines. They're all gone because of a lot of things. Many people that were mayors and things, they did not help the situation either, you know. But that's why today we got that museum, and we keep that museum going. As you can see, you know, we get stuff in there all the time, and this well, they said it was 33 people there this past week. I didn't get down there, but that's why we want to keep the history, because a lot of folks don't know history, and a lot of folks don't even know about Osage in general. You know, at one time, the only way you could get into Morgantown was through Osage. See, there was no Star City Bridge until the 50s, early 50s.
Right.
So
and that mountain there, Charlene Marshall was telling me about that mountain there, and there was a school on top of it before they dug it out, so that you could get up to Mount Morris, across the bridge and up to Mount Morris.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they tore all that mountain out of there and moved to school.
And moved to school. Yeah, that was our.
Now, did you go to school in?
Yeah.
Where all schools did you go to?
I went to Floyd B. Cox. That was in Floyd Cox in Osage, and that was the superintendent of the county was Floyd B. Cox. So we went from 1 to 6. And then over at Monongalia High, where I think it was elementary school there after they mixed schools, we went there from 7 to 12. But from 1 to 6 was the hardest time, because if you wasn't smart enough to go from 6 to 7, you were never going to 6 to 7.
Is that right? Huh.
That's right. Those teachers, I'm sure, that felt that what kind of, you wasn't going to have no easy life, no matter what. See, in those days, there wasn't no mixed schools or anything, and if you got anything, you had to be smart enough. Just about like that lady, that Hidden Figures, you know, people like that who really had to learn, had to go, and those teachers taught you. And I know many friends that I knew later, you know, when I was gone, that they went to school, and they Mrs. Slaughter and some other teachers, that they tell how they taught them. And I'm sure when they went, because some of them they kept, even after integrated schools, that what a good teacher they were. But we already knew that, see, because if you wasn't smart enough, and matter of fact, I know because I passed on condition from 6 to 7. Now, if you wasn't smart enough to be in the 7th grade, you're going back to the 6th grade, which is a little bit embarrassing. You're going to learn. You know, you don't want to go. You don't go back to 6th grade. You better be smart enough. They was not going to prepare you to go out in that hard world. You wasn't going to have no easy world. You know, I would feel that most folks from 1 to 6 is probably much smarter than kids from 1 to 12 today, because, you know, they do pass kids through, you know, and I know, because I'm there, and I know a lot of youngsters that have one kid across the street lived across the street. He has you know, he has his graduation cap on and all, you know, and me and those kids can't hardly read and write, you know, but I think about that, you know, and I say, well, no, we had to learn. We had to know our A's, B's, and had to know how to count. You know, you didn't have to have like a McDonald's register to tell you how much change to give back. You know, if you gave somebody $1 and it was going to be 48 cents, you knew exactly how to count that back. That's what, and today kids don't even have to do that, you know.
Tell us about the museum in Scotts Run.
I think we've been about 10 years, close around 10 years. We started that museum. Mary Jane, we had a museum up close where the shop was there for a while, and then that building was torn down, and we was over the old community building, and so Mary Jane let us, you know, have that, you know, use that as a museum, and we never thought that we were going to, you know, build it up even like it is right now. So we worked hard on, you know, just getting things in there and participating. You know, Eve Fawkes, you know, a professor, and her students did a lot of work. Eve did probably most all the research there to make sure, you know, everything was right. You know, all the miners that died, and, you know, there's a book, every name, every story. So that's how that kind of got started, and it's still working really good right now.
Well, Al, thank you for coming in and sharing some of the stories with us, and we look forward, you know, to hearing you sing, Tony.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys so much, and I just want to thank you all for just inviting me here today, and hope that some of the stories or some of the things that somebody may have got something out of it, you know, but I certainly appreciate this day, and I appreciate your hospitalities. Okay. Thank you all so much.
Well, Al, it was a pleasure having you here today. And from us here at the Morgantown History Museum, we'll see you next time.
Oh, this little light of mine,
I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All in the community, I'm gonna let it shine. All in the community, I'm gonna let it shine. All in the community, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Ooh. Look at us, after all these years together. Look at us, after all that we've been through. Look at us, still leaning on each other. If you want to see how true love should be, then just look at us. Look at you, still pretty as a picture. Look at me, I'm still crazy over you. Look at us, still depending on each other. If you want to see how true love should be, then just look at us. In 100 years from now, you know without a doubt, we'll all look back and wonder how we made it all work out. Chances are we'll go down in history, yeah, yeah, yeah. If you want to see how true love should be, then just look at us. If you want to see how true love should be, then just look at us.